All right. I don't know what happened. I'm hoping that everyone comes back. Looks like I just pressed the wrong button. So my apologies for that. Good thing technology works. So one more time, for those of you who find this live stream, even though it was just interrupted, would you please let me know whether I'm synced or not? But tonight we are going to talk about, I'm going to wait just for whoever is here. Unbelievable. Okay, I am, in fact, live. All right. I know that all of you who were just watching probably feel like, oh, great, thanks. Like this is tragic, or this is a sign that maybe non-dual meditation isn't the topic for these days. But actually, we just overcame the obstacle. Non-dual meditation is deep, profound, transformative, and it unquestionably meets with obstacles when you talk about it. In this case, the obstacle is my own fat fingers touching the wrong button. I won't do that again. So, over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to unpack the aspects of the topic of non-duality that I think are very important for people to understand as they move into this practice. I never would have thought that this was something to talk about on YouTube, but it's become obvious that somehow the topic of non-duality is really taking off. And what that means is it's becoming popular. And when things become popular quickly, that means that lots of people are sort of gearing up to begin presenting something like this. But non-dual meditation and the entire topic of non-duality is really not something to talk about if you don't have proper grounding in it. So I do talk about non-dual meditation and non-dual experience, but I do that usually in the context of retreats where there's a container built up so that everything is clear and people can ask questions and we don't plunge too deeply into kind of mind-bending topics, because non-dual experience can be very disorienting if you're not aware of what it is and you're pushing to have it. So I'm noticing, and I mentioned this on the previous live stream, that there are uncountable channels going up about awakening, about my non-dual experience, or how what life is like after awakening, or anything at all that has to do with sudden awakening. It almost always indicates that the person who's talking about it has been probably experimenting with non-dual teachings. Okay, John, I'm glad you're here. Now remember, all y'all, if my audio gets out of sync, I really would appreciate it if you tell me that. So the non-dual teachings that people are referring to are usually coming from the Hindu tradition. And I say that because the non-dual teachings of the Buddhist tradition are usually only presented to people with the caveats of don't talk too much about this stuff. It can be really confusing, both for the people who you're talking to, but also for you. If you are talking about non-dual experience or the view of non-dual reality, before you're really ready to communicate about that, it can confuse your path. Ask me how I know. But at some point, it is appropriate. It's important to understand what is this non-dual thing that seems to be so powerful, and why are so many people talking about it? Well, we're going to talk about that tonight, and then next time, probably Monday and next Thursday, I'm going to unroll some of the more the kind of background information that's good for people to have. So let me just start out. And remember last time I said how I never prepare, because if I prepare, I just give a canned talk. Well, I thought about that today, and I thought, well, maybe a canned talk would be better than a disorganized talk. So I'm going to try. So first of all, non-duality is the basis for the transformative experience that people call awakening or enlightenment. There is no awakening or enlightenment separate from non-dual experience. So when someone's practice begins to tip them into the transformative dimension of spirituality, but usually this means meditation, meditative spirituality, if that's how you think about it. When you are coming into the non-dual experience, that is your first step into the part of the path that's going to genuinely transform you. Everything you've done before then was probably preparation so that when you step into the non-dual experience, you don't become confused. Because the easiest thing, and almost the obvious thing to happen when you start to experience non-dual reality, is that you don't have any idea what's going on. You become confused. So there's justifiably an on-ramp to the non-dual experience. But we have to talk about this term non-dual because it's a very abstract term, the way it's being used these days, and it's a very practical term, a very understandable term in its historical setting, because this has only popped up on YouTube and other social media platforms in the past couple of years, probably in the past year. There's this proliferation of people starting channels to talk about non-duality and awakening. And, as someone who's been doing this for a long time, and I've certainly had my ups and downs with it and really hoped that I was getting somewhere long before I should have. I understand the temptation to begin talking about this stuff early, but I also understand the reality that it's not something that's good for someone to do. When you start talking about awakening and non-dual experience, you really have to have a basis of discipline and understanding in your own life. Otherwise, you can lead people astray. Even if you're saying exactly the same words as an authentic non-dual teacher like Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta or any of those amazing people who were legitimate teachers of non-dual experience. Again, the word non-dual, we're going to get rid of that soon, and we're going to go into what the terms really are. But there are authentic traditions that teach this, that people are drawing from primarily because they take the non-dual element of spirituality and put it up front, and there are no prerequisites for it. So you can just buy a book and start reading about stuff that probably isn't really going to be the meat and potatoes or maybe the curry and leeks of your experience for many, many years, because there's this inconvenient other part of the non-dual path, which is the path of duality, the path that we're all struggling with. And if we don't know how to work with the dualistic experience in a sane way, we're not going to be able to work with the non-dual experience in a sane way. So we have to understand the way that our mind has become confused, which is what we typically call dualistic perception, we have to understand it and begin to work with it patiently while we are beginning our non-dual path. If we don't do that, if we launch directly into trying to have non-dual experience, we're setting ourselves up for what's called bypassing. And bypassing will take the rest of the years of your life where you could be making genuine progress along a path of awakening, and it will consume them in a counterfeit path. You will be using non-dual teachings as a way to get away from the messiness and suffering of your dualistic life. So we don't want that to happen. Ask me how I know. So, what is non-dualism? Well, here's where I'm going to use some notes here. Non-duality is not a very fun word to talk about because it's immediately philosophical. And it comes from a tradition, two traditions really, but it comes from traditional teachings that are rooted in a philosophical understanding of reality that is then used as a basis for experiential methods. And what are those experiential methods? Well, I mean, we can call them whatever our tradition calls them, but the way that modern people are going to understand this is meditation. Non-dual teachings lead to a transformative experience that itself can lead eventually to what's called a non-dual realization. But it does so not by doing nothing, but by meditating. It really does. There's only one person I've ever heard of who's legitimate, in my opinion, who didn't have to do any meditation at all, who just woke up, and that's Ramana Maharshi. I think I have Ramana Maharshi right here. Him. Whoops. Where am I? I should be here. Hang on here. There. I'm here. So Ramana Maharshi is quite famous because he's like the one person, unquestionable situation of someone going from being an ordinary 16-year-old to being someone who had a total transformative insight with no teachings and no path, no meditation, no nothing. Ramana Maharshi actually did that. Ramana Maharshi was great. There's so many amazing things about Ramana Maharshi, and you can read, he didn't write books really, but the people around him wrote down what he said, and his life story is very inspiring, but it's also important to understand. You cannot do what he did. It happened to him spontaneously. So if we were going to be sudden realizers like Ramana Maharshi, either it already would have happened, or we just have to wait. And maybe it happens on the last day of our life, but it isn't as if learning meditation and studying the meaning of all this stuff is going to get in our way. So it's really important that we don't have the chosen one syndrome and think that we don't have to do anything because Ramana Maharshi didn't. Now, I know other people are probably going to bring up Eckhart Tolle. I think the perspective of people in the meditation world is that Eckhart Tolle has had something has happened to Eckhart Tolle. There's something legitimate, and he does not seem to me to be trying to scam anyone. I actually met him. We didn't sit down and get to know one another, but I went to one of his very first public appearances it's like in 1999 or something like that, or the first time I'd ever heard of him. And we were in Chicago, and he was teaching at the aquarium, the Chicago Aquarium. They have this beautiful hall, and he had just published his book, The Power of Now, which was interesting to me because I assumed that it was a book about Mahamudra, which is the tradition that I was studying at the time, because, nowness is the essence of the Mahamudra meditation experience. And here this guy is he had a really cool looking book. At least I thought the book had a really cool cover. And I picked it up in a bookstore, and it's just like, oh, this is awesome. This is a new way. This is a very fresh take on all of this stuff. But I didn't really understand anything more. And then we went to see him like 3 days later. And it was interesting. I liked him a lot at that time. And I went up and I shook his hand, and I've been around a lot of people who are accomplished meditators. And I've never seen anyone nervous and sweating before, but he was. And that right away, I just couldn't understand. I mean, if you're this guy who's had this awakening, what's going on here, man? Now, in the years since then, anytime I've seen him on video, oh man, he's as calm can be. So he definitely deepened whatever it was. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, I have no reason to think that Eckhart Tolle accomplished what Ramana Maharshi did. That would be quite a feat. Like, you have someone like Beethoven, who's just an incredible composer. That doesn't mean that anyone else who composes something is as great as Beethoven. It just means they're also a composer. So there have been a lot of composers since Beethoven who we don't know about. So I think I think Eckhart Tolle was really skillful or lucky in bringing an audience to the teachings on what are called the nature of awareness. But I think it's important to understand that he's a very, very small voice. And he also, like Ramana Maharshi, isn't a very good teacher because he didn't have a teacher. He doesn't have a method. He's retrofitting whatever happened to him, and we can get into what probably happened to him. I mean, a Buddhist can sort of assess, based on his description, what it was that he experienced, because there are many stages of understanding things, and any of them are powerful and profound. But what Ramana Maharshi, he's over here. What Ramana Maharshi realized really holds up. He's kind of in the same vein as, let's find. So he's very similar to this guy, Nisargadatta. I'm gone again. They keep disappearing me. But he's very much in line with Nisargadatta, who was another master who lived after him in India. Totally, I don't think there's any real controversy. Nisargadatta was the real deal. Definitely a non-dual master. But one interesting thing about Nisargadatta is he did have a teacher and he did have a method. And they taught basically the same thing. So there are a lot of people who have purchased the books. Like where are the books here? I have, I think this is, okay, I'm sorry, I'm not here, but that's okay. This is Nisargadatta's book, and here's a book by Ramana Maharshi. And, what's going on here? And then here's me again. People can read these books because they're just available. They're just available to anybody who wants them. And if you can get into them, some people can't, but many people can. A lot of meditation students I've worked with over the years, at some point they want to understand this stuff. And so I usually say, in addition to getting something like Fearless Simplicity by Soni Rinpoche, which, it doesn't get much better than Dzogchen or Mahamudra as far as comprehensive teachings. But if you want another take on it, or you want to hear a more folksy approach, then read I Am That, or read Ramana Maharshi's, the transcripts of his talks. But just understand that these people are talking from a very high platform of realization. And when someone does that, the part of us that is awake, because we all have this awakening within us already, this awake element, our Buddha nature, that's what a Buddhist would call it. When they're talking, it will resonate with that part within us. And by listening to someone who has mastered this talk, when listening to someone talk who has mastered this, it can affect us in a way where we feel very, very close to what they're talking about. Now, I used to think that I think I'm seeing what they're seeing. That was when I was 22. Now, many, many years later, looking back on that, and I've continued this practice, without any break since then, I realized that no, what I was experiencing at 22 was profound for me at 22. It wouldn't be anything like what 30 years of practice have led to. When you take your time and really value this and try and do it appropriately to where you are in your life, it unfolds in a durable way, and your need to have an experience that somehow confirms your identity goes away, and you just become an authentic practitioner, and you're not so worried about how realized or not you are. And the punchline is you're not realized. You definitely are not realized just by having a non-dual experience. So the idea behind the non-dual traditions are that they help you release yourself from the confused element, which is called your mind, your dualistic mind. In Tibetan, we call this sem. In Sanskrit, it's called vijnana, consciousness, but it's the part of us where there is an observer and a thing observed. There's me and my life. There's me and my thoughts. There's my reaction to that. There's my longing to have non-dual experience. All of that is dualistic experience, and it's the only thing that we are really familiar with. And the part of us which makes decisions and the part of us which evaluates is in that. It's in the dualistic part of us. So the non-dual element of us, and I keep saying that we need to get rid of that. We need to move away from that word, which is going to be the next thing we do. But the non-dual part of us doesn't make decisions. It doesn't have opinions. It doesn't have preferences. It doesn't have fear. It also doesn't have a sense of personal self. It doesn't need it. It's free of anything like that. But we're not used to that. We really aren't. We can form thoughts that imitate that and which fool us. So we can think that we're having that type of experience, but it's still just a thought. It's only when we begin to encounter genuine non-dual experience where we have a perspective to understand how subtle and tricky the mind is. One way of having a non-dual experience is to spend as many years as necessary refining our dualistic mind through meditation practice so that the non-dual element begins to shine through. But I'm telling you, that takes time. That doesn't just take a weekend, and it doesn't just take an awakening experience. Awakening experiences are kind of jokes. They're not real. It doesn't happen like that. If it did happen like that, we'd have a rich literature talking about how it happens. But actually, we have a rich literature talking about how that isn't how it happens. We can get glimpses, and that is not realization. That's just a glimpse. So, the other way that we can have a powerful non-dual experience is to encounter a person who fulfills a couple of criteria. One is that they are stable in the non-dual element of their being, really stable. The second criterion is that they understand a skillful method for introducing that to someone who doesn't have the stable platform to yet achieve that on their own. So they can help you attain a glimpse of that. That glimpse is temporary. It's like a gift. It's what a skillful teacher may know how to do. Now, the tradition of people who actually, the tradition of people who really train in this, who actually have methods, are the teachers from the Mahamudra and Dzogchen tradition. They are actual teachers, people who have lineages and who have all the authorization and kind of credentials to do this, are trained in methods which can provoke this experience in a student, and then they're able to give you methods to stabilize it. But just having an experience, those are a dime a dozen. Are they precious? Yes, they're precious if you know what to do with them. What do you do with them? You stabilize them. How do you stabilize them? Well, there are two ways to stabilize them. The most important is meditation practice, real meditation practice. The other is that you learn how to make different types of decisions in your life so that the dualistic part that you've transcended momentarily in that glimpse becomes more sane and more cooperative with your long-term path. There is no way to shorten that path. That is the shortened path. The shortest path of all in any spiritual tradition on this earth is to receive teachings which help you attain a glimpse of your non-dual nature. That is the fastest path there is, but it's only fast if you are able to use methods to sustain that glimpse. The glimpse itself is just a glimpse. It goes away. You don't have the stability yet for that glimpse to change your life. You're not going to be Ramana Maharshi. Otherwise, you probably already would be. By the time you're getting a glimpse, that glimpse is just, that would take over your life completely. But I have never heard of that happening other than Ramana Maharshi. And believe me, I have looked. I have really tried to find people who didn't have a path, but they all do. And so I think the best attitude for us to have is that we're going to have a path. And that's not a bad thing, though. It just means that this is real rather than some kind of sudden fix it. Okay, I don't love the term non-dual. That's because it's a philosophical term rather than an experiential term. And although I certainly do enjoy both Advaita Vedanta and Shaivist philosophy, as well as Mahayana, Mahamudra, and Dzogchen philosophy, those are the traditions that teach the non-dual experience, I found that when you're actually around people who are training you in this stuff, they don't use the word non-dual. It's just, that's not a word that comes up that much. But where does it come from? Well, non-dual teachings, as far as we can tell, originated about 3,000 years ago in some of the very early Sanskrit texts. Then, two traditions began to unfold methods for people to stabilize the non-dual state. The word for non-dual, as it originally appears, is Advaita. A-D-V-A-I-T-A, Advaita. And, there are diacritical marks in these words if you really want to get academic, and I don't. Advaita, which is translated as non-dual, basically means not two. It means just that, not two. This is two, this is not two. This is one. Not two doesn't mean one. Not two doesn't mean three. It just means not two. Now, why am I saying that? Because what it's talking about, what non-dual refers to, is the core of our experience from moment to moment, which has been divided from its non-dual basis to its dualistic experience of confusion. Subject is the part of us that is perceiving and experiencing other. Other is the object of the subject. The subject sees the object. So I see the world around me. I have thoughts. I have memories. That's a dualistic experience. And the experience itself is innocent, but the confusion that is born in that experience is the confusion that takes this to be real. So the subjective part, the part of us that we call me, is thought to be real, and the objects that we experience, other, is taken to be real. And if they were real, then there would be no non-dual reality to experience. That would be reality. But it seems that about 3,000 years ago or before, meditators began to experience that, wait a minute, there's a subtler mode of experience where this dichotomy of self and other is seen to be unreal. And that perceiving experience is not dualistic, even though it's very hard for us to think about or imagine, well, how could that be? How could an experience not be dualistic? Wouldn't there be a me experiencing it? Well, no, there wouldn't. But the problem is that we're using the mind to think about it, and the mind is a dualistic function. So, Advaita teachings are the teachings that help us go beyond the dualistic experience. Now, Advaita, it's just, first of all, it's just a term in Sanskrit. It can be used by anyone at all, but it became associated with Advaita Vedanta. Vedanta are the early spiritual teachings of India, or some of them, and they're incredible teachings. And Advaita Vedanta teachings are truly, a world treasure. They flourished and coexisted alongside other traditions. The most prominent of those traditions is the Buddhist tradition, which is also a non-dual tradition. Advaita, we mostly know it through Advaita Vedanta. So, for those of you who, I don't know if maybe you saw my previous stuff, I'm just going to throw some pictures up. So one of the most famous modern masters of Advaita Vedanta was Ramakrishna, this person. His main student was Vivekananda, this person. The main book that you can study about these people is this one, The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Don't be put off by the title, The Gospel. That's just an old Indian translation convention. It's an amazing book. And then later, we have Ramana Maharshi. Wait a minute, let's find, where is he? I just had him, didn't I? Oh yeah, him. We have Ramana Maharshi, and then a little after him, Nisargadatta. Now there were others too. I'm not saying these are the only non-dual teachers out of the Advaita tradition, but they're probably the three most well-known, and the most important of those three was the first one, Ramakrishna. He was kind of, he was like the Leonardo da Vinci of Indian spirituality, but he died before 1900, and so his legacy continues to this day, and in the wake of his impact, other teachers came along and supplied the need for the spiritual hunger of those who wanted to discover the enlightened state. So Advaita Vedanta in our world mostly comes through this pathway, but then there's also the Shaivist traditions. I won't go into what that is. And then there's, in particular, the Kashmiri Shaivist traditions, which became well known to Western people sometime around the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was one living, it bottlenecked. So there weren't a lot of holders of these traditions, which is one of the reasons it's not the easiest way to follow a non-dual path. The actual teachings of the Shaivist tradition and the Kashmiri Shaivist non-dual traditions, you have to have a qualified teacher. And although there, I'm sure, are qualified teachers, there are not a lot of them. And my understanding was the whole tradition, which was 1,000, 1,500 years old, maybe older, going all the way back to some of the early texts on non-dual experience, was bottlenecked with one person. By the 80s or 90s, it was a man, I think his name was Swami Lakshman Ju was his name, and he's dead now. I think he probably has some disciples, but I mean, there's not a lot of places to go and get the authentic transmission of that particular thing. So these days, most of it comes to Advaita Vedanta, which is much more widespread. And you can go on YouTube, and there's a tremendous teacher named Swami Sarva Priyananda at the Vedanta Society of New York. He is all over YouTube, and if you're really interested in the non-dual path, go there. That's your first stop. In my opinion, that's your first stop. Swami Sarva Priyananda, he's great. Advaita is the word for non-dual in the Sanskrit language. In the Tibetan language, the word is nime, and nime, how do I spell it? N-Y-I-M-E with an accent over the E. And it, just like the Sanskrit word, means not to. But what's interesting about Buddhism or Buddhist training is that they don't rely on the word nime, which means not to, because they're not interested in the mistake of dualism. They're far more oriented toward the reality. So the word that they often use is sunjuk, which means inseparability, the inseparability of the seer and the seen. Now, the inseparability of the seer and the seen is also non-dual experience, but it isn't taught in quite that way. It's a different way, and I think a much faster way and a much more stable way of arriving at that understanding through the gradual refining of the mind until awareness shines through, and then one learns to sort of leap into awareness and rest there for as long as they can before the mind pulls them back out. Buddhist practice is like that. Now, this is something that is very important to me to get across tonight. People can tend to think that non-dual teachings, if you just went on YouTube and you were really interested in the non-dual movement because you've heard someone talk about it and you're like, whoa, this whole non-dual thing is so fascinating and I want to learn all about it. That's great. It is fascinating and you should learn all about it. But you should understand that by far the richest body of teachings in the world, by far, is in the Buddhist tradition. I'm not saying that the Hindu tradition doesn't have excellent teachings. It does. A handful of them compared to what's been going on in the Buddhist world for 2,500 years. There are entire traditions set up to take you from day one to the swiftest possible path to non-dual awakening. The most practical one that I recommend for everyone is Mahamudra. Mahamudra it's the stuff. That's, if you are interested in non-duality and you're not interested in faking it, but you're interested in actually doing it, Mahamudra is something that you should at least check out. If you have the opportunity, you can try the other method of teaching non-duality, which is called Dzogchen. Dzogchen is extremely profound, but it's a way of shifting you into a non-dual experience immediately. and it doesn't give you much support after that. So it operates by you being willing to do that for the rest of your life. It teaches you how to shift yourself into a non-dual experience and not mess with it. And then when you come out of it, you learn to recognize that you've come out of it and you shift yourself again. And I know from my experience that sounds an awful lot like what the non-dual teachers like Nisargadatta and other, Hindu-inspired teachers talk about. It is similar, but the Dzogchen teachings is just far, far richer and more powerful in my experience. If it weren't, that's not what I would do. I wouldn't be a Dzogchen practitioner or a Mahamudra practitioner. I'd be an Advaita Vedanta practitioner. And of course, I love Advaita Vedanta. My shelves are filled with Advaita Vedanta texts. I watch Swami Sarvapriyananda. I read the life story again and again of Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharshi, and Nisargadatta. I love those people, but I gotta say, Buddhism is alive and well, and it is definitely, it's far more practical, and it's more real, and it's far more available to Western people because it actually transmitted itself in an authentic way with genuinely trained people to support you. But if your thing is the Hindu expression of it, that's legit too. It's going to take a little more on your part. And if you're not working with a qualified teacher, honestly, I'm just going to say, do something else. Because we're living in a world which biases us toward impatience and making cognitive errors. And if you're making cognitive errors in Advaita Vedanta, you are going to think that you are awakened when you aren't even close. You're going to think you're experiencing non-duality when you're simply not. Buddhism sets you up so that you have a dialogue with people from a lineage, teachers and elder students who can really help you identify whether your experience of non-dual awareness is genuine or not. And 9 times out of 10, it's not. And that doesn't matter how much practice you've done. This is subtle stuff, and it's worth your time. It's worth your effort. So I don't want this to go too long tonight. I'm going to prepare, I said this last time, but I really mean it. I'm going to prepare a more structured talk with visuals and, things like this and this and this, but that's not for tonight. That's for later. Non-dual awakening happens in 3 stages. This is the most important thing to me right now. Over the last hour, I said a lot of things I said are important, but this is important. You can experience your non-dual nature. You can, and you should try. I mean, it's important. When you start to taste that, it will change the course of your life. But it happens in 3 stages. And this is what is completely lacking from most of the stuff I see on YouTube about non-duality. It's like they don't even know this, and that's nothing but a red flag. So I have a strong opinion about this, but thank you for listening to me. The 3 stages are understanding, experience, and realization. Understanding is what is probably going on for the first 5 years of you engaging non-dual teachings. You have to understand what's being said and what it's referring to, and you have to contemplate it and try to get your head around what it's saying. And as you begin to understand it, you're going to have a new set of incredibly refined ideas, good ones, emerge in your mind that change your outlook of the world. They feel like a transformation has happened, but they're just understanding. You have not yet probably even glimpsed your actual non-dual nature. That will happen in the next stage. So understanding is important. It's also, there's no way around it. You can't be born and then within 1 year become a 10-year-old. You just can't. You have to be a 1-year-old, then a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and eventually, in a very predictable amount of time, you get to 10, and then you are a 10-year-old. The non-dual path isn't exactly that lockstep. Everyone's different. Some people are going to rapidly go through it. Some people are going to take forever to go through it. But even rapidly is years. That's rapid, and it's worth it. Some things are so valuable that 5 years is nothing. 10 years is nothing. So you're aiming to the highest thing a human being can aim for here. So it's good to be patient and to do it well. Understanding means that you're getting your head around it. You're using your critical intelligence in a way to analyze your experience and investigate reality. When you start to understand what non-duality is, you will begin to have experience of non-duality where you shift into a mode of experience which is not the thinking mind. And you will not at first be 100% certain that this has happened. That's going to take a period of time. You'll get glimpses of a non-dual state, but you won't yet have your footing to know this is the non-dual state. You might think, I think this is the non-dual state. And that's good. It may be the non-dual state, but you'll still have doubt. You're in the stage that's called experience. You go from understanding to experience, and experience eventually arrives at certainty. The Tibetan word for this is nyeshe. You have total confidence in the non-dual state, but you're still just having intermittent experiences of it. You might pop into the non-dual state and not have any doubt that this is the non-dual state, and you just be with it for 7 seconds, and then the dualistic mind pulls you back in, and you realize, whoa, okay, I'm back in the mind now, and then you try to reestablish the non-dual state. It's glimpses that are sustained and lost, sustained and lost. That's the stage of experience. Now, the stage of experience is powerful. This is not something to feel like, oh, I want to get to the last one, realization. No, you don't. You want to get to the middle one, experience. And the way you get to the middle one is through the first one, understanding. When you get to experience, you're going to begin to have the payoff. You're going to lose confusion. You're going to lose fear. The core of what you are is going to become simple and potent. It's not going to be confused and complex. It's going to know, and it's going to develop a tremendous confidence. The more stable it is, the more by its very presence, ordinary fears that preoccupy us, such as being afraid of losing what you have or not getting what you want, or being afraid of dying, those begin to diminish because you are experiencing something which is not vulnerable to those types of fears. But you're still in this middle stage. Understanding leads to experience. Experience lasts, and it takes time. And at some point, the non-dual state takes over. And the tendency toward dualistic experience collapses. That's called realization. Realization is rare, very rare. Probably Ramana Maharshi had realization. Certainly Ramakrishna had realization. And then we have all of these people. Like, here are some people who are within the Buddhist world, almost universally, people agree that they have realization. So I'm just going to show you some pictures of them. My personal hero is this guy, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche was a master of Dzogchen, clearly stable. Who else do we have here? Here's the big one, Karmapa. The 16th Karmapa was just an amazing, amazing practitioner of the non-dual state. Being around, to me, the legends around him, and although I didn't meet the 16th Karmapa, it seems like everyone that trained me was a student of him. So I've definitely grown up in the environment that is colored by this guy. This is a dude who was just fully radiating the non-dual state and helping other people achieve it. He was also a teacher and friend of the guy I just showed you, this guy. And again, I just wish I were on camera there. There we go. So then this person's son, who also teaches the non-dual state, is this guy. This is Soni Rinpoche. Soni Rinpoche is a modern teacher. He's 59 years old. He is an incredible teacher. His father, like I said, is Tulku Urgyen, and the person who sort of got his training started was the Karmapa, the guy I just showed, the Karmapa. Then we have others like Khenpo Sultram Gyamtso Rinpoche, and who else do we have here? I'm just going to leave it at that. These types of teachers probably are in the third stage. The non-dual state does not ebb and flow in them. Now, I'm not going to say that about like my teacher, Soni Rinpoche. I don't really know where he is, and Soni Rinpoche again is this fellow. I'm not going to say that he has realization. He certainly, I'm sure if you asked him, he would say, no. I just have experience. But, maybe his level of experience looks a lot like realization to other practitioners. All I know is that he's a very, very effective and gracious teacher of the non-dual state. So we start with understanding. Then we go to experience. And depending on our dedication to that path, we may end up in realization. That is profound. Realization of the non-dual state isn't just something that everyone is going to experience and then start a YouTube channel. So really, really beware of anyone who claims to have realized the non-dual state, because I'll bet all the money in my bank account that they are probably at the very beginning, if even, of experience. If they're saying that they have awakened, very unlikely. Be careful. Now, let's get to some of the questions, or I guess the question. Clinton asks, can you say something briefly? Well, I don't know about that. About the connection between non-dual experience and the four boundless attitudes. All right. Yes. So the four, I assume, you mean, so boundless attitudes are the four Brahma Viharas. These are conditioned states of dualistic mind, love, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. That's how they're usually described. These are states of mind, dualistic mind, that we cultivate so that our dualistic mind becomes enriched in such a way where it's much easier for us to recognize the non-dual state and have experience in the non-dual state. So these are parts of the path where we're doing something so that we can trigger a non-dual insight. They themselves are karmic, they're conditioned, they're dualistic, but they're virtuous. That's what they're for. Now, the interesting thing about practices like that, is that they are the four states. So love, kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity are the dualistic, they're fabricated versions of what naturally comes out of the non-dual state of mind. So the state of wisdom or Buddha nature, expresses itself with genuine love, genuine compassion that are not in any way cranked up or practiced or conditioned. Just like the sun doesn't have to sort of turn itself on every day and then crank away and get tired and need a break. The sun is just shining. That's what it does. The heat, the light, all of that just comes out of the sun based on what it is. Well, the non-dual state gives birth to what we would describe as incredible compassion, incredible equanimity, incredible love. It's just the nature of the non-dual state. But we haven't realized the non-dual state yet, so we're not blazing with the self-existing qualities of love, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So what we're doing is we're building up versions of that which are really in accord, or they resemble what eventually those qualities will be like. And it kind of gets us ready. It's sort of like a rehearsal in the best sense, but that's what they are. Traditions generally encourage people to practice those types of things to get them ready to hear the non-dual teachings and not kind of freak out. Loving kindness and compassion in particular stabilize the subtle body. They stabilize your winds and your inner channels, which are also dualistic, by the way. But it stabilizes our life, and it puts us in a wholesome state of being which can reflect a deeper reality and cognize it and get it. So, in the Tibetan tradition, they have a whole host of things that you do to get yourself ready to recognize the non-dual state, called the Nundro, or the preliminary practices. And these are ways of training yourself so that it becomes difficult not to get the non-dual state when it's finally introduced. So there are tons of preparatory level practices that you can engage in to make your path much easier. And those are some of the popular ones. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. If you didn't give a like, please do. It certainly helps out our channel. And I'm going to go into a little bit more of what the teachings look like and what the preparation looks like and how we get through this initial experience that I called understanding so that we can get into experience. Because we shouldn't be thinking about realization. Realization is going to happen if we can get to experience. But we have to get to experience if we're ever going to get to realization. And in order to get to experience, we're going to have to pass through understanding. For many people, understanding is the most profound thing they will ever have experienced in their life. And it will be difficult for them not to think that this must be realization. That's how profound understanding can be. But it isn't even experience yet, much less realization. So we as a culture are not really prepared for how utterly profound and life-altering this stuff is, but it's all good stuff. It makes us much better human beings. It's win-win in every way. There are no downsides and only upsides to doing this. So even though someone might say, like me, that it's very profound and life-altering, that's a good thing. That's what we want. And in order for that to happen, we have to do it authentically. Understanding, then experience. And then by staying with experience for as long as it takes, if we're diligent, it can even out into realization. So I'll go through that more and more. And thank you all for tuning in. I'm really starting to appreciate YouTube. And I think I'll probably get better and more organized as we go along. But I just to show you that I do have something for you, I'm going to show you a little picture. See, I have stuff that I want to show you later, but that's for later. Okay. So thank you, Clint and John and Leah and Lori and April. I'll see you all, and anyone else, I'll see you probably next Monday, where we'll really start to get into it. I'm sending emails out to announce this to anyone who wants those emails. So just go to our website, findinggroundmeditation.com, and sign up for the I guess it's the Meditation 101 emails, and you'll get on our mailing list and you'll know what I'm going to talk about. But I wish you all the very best. Bon appetit. Have a good dinner tonight.